Thanks for coming out tonight, especially on such a cold night. We appreciate that, and I think we have an excellent program for you tonight. I'm Charles Mauro. I organize, moderate, and put these programs together as part of NYTECH UX. This UX group is part of a much larger group here in New York that supports the technology ecosystem. We have many different tech tracks. UX just happens to be one of them. We support education, networking, community, and advocacy. We've had a major presence in Washington in the recent lobbying efforts, and we also have a CEO roundtable if there are any CEOs here, especially early stage or mid-stage startups. That's a particularly interesting group. And of course, we have actual annual memberships available. If you join NYTECH, these sessions are, of course, free. Just very quickly, special thanks to our sponsors. We have a terrific group of major corporations and agencies who support these programs and support NYTECH overall. And if it weren't for them, of course, we wouldn't be here tonight. Second set of thank yous, especially to EXO Group, who has sponsored and provided this venue for us. Just an update about the format tonight. This was originally planned as a debate between two experts. But the more we worked together with Marc and Ankit, we realized that both of these individuals had a tremendous amount to offer, both on the positive and the negative side. So what we're going to hear tonight is from both of them individually. They're going to present the positive aspects of gamification and some of its limitations. Then we'll have a Q&A. So I want to be clear that we don't have necessarily Marc on the negative side and Ankit on the positive side. We're bringing together two very experienced points of view. You may have read your email this morning. We're actually using a gamification app here. If you answered the poll this morning, whether you think gamification is ultimate hype or the ultimate tool, we'll have this data. We took this poll this morning. Probably got emails on that. At the end of the session, right toward the end, you will receive an email around 7:30, and you'll be able to cast your vote again based on what you've heard in the presentations. So just, sort of an interesting way of looking at and increasing audience participation. I'd like now to introduce both of the speakers. First, tonight we're going to have Marc Resnick. Marc, as I said, has spoken previously here at NYTECH. His original talk was on the cognitive science of user experience. Very interesting lecture. Marc has a PhD from University of Michigan. His primary focus and expertise is human factors engineering. He teaches at Bentley in Boston, which you may or may not know has a very strong, interactive design program. Our second speaker, Ankit, will be looking at this more from the standpoint of actual implementation and business performance enhancement. Ankit's background is from, he has a graduate degree from Wharton. He worked on Kevin Werbach's very famous Coursera course on gamification, one of the most widely viewed and participated in courses on Coursera. And Kit will bring to us tonight an unusual perspective because he's actually worked extensively in strategy and gamification, but he's one of the few experts that has real demonstrable expertise in applications. So he'll show you some of his work in that area as well. Okay, so Marc, why don't you start with us?
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, Charles. And to give you just a brief background on where I come to gamification from, my area is understanding fundamental human cognitive and behavioral psychology, what makes people tick, and how can we use that to design products, systems, and environments so that the interaction works. It works for the benefit of the person who designed the product, who wants to get something out of it. It works for the benefit of the user who wants to get something out of it. And it's able to translate the two of those different sets of requirements together. And that's not always so easy to do because, as many of you know, if you ever have met a real person, we don't often think logically or rationally or in any kind of way that's very easy to model. And it's because of some of those limitations that makes gamification a powerful tool. It's also the reason that makes gamification so hard to implement, because it can't be boiled down to, well, let's just give people points and they'll do whatever we want them to do. If that's what you came here to see, unfortunately, I can't give you that answer. So because of that, well, I guess that's why I'm here today, so let me just move on. Games are being implemented in a variety of different places. It seems like, and you can see this is just not even an exclusive list. This is just a very short list of all the different places that are using games. We have badges, and we have leaderboards, and we have points for things, and you can even think of frequent flyer mile programs. If any of you flew here or took a bus here or got a coffee at Starbucks on your way over here, you probably got points for doing something. Well, that might build loyalty. That might be called gamification, but did it feel much like a game while you were doing it? I flew back from Texas on Sunday. I had a 4-hour delay in Austin. I had a 7-hour delay in Detroit. I was told 4 times that I would never make it back to Boston that day because they were closing this airport and that airport. I tell you what, it didn't really feel very gamey to me. So one thing that we do know is, one, gamification is not about making things like a game. And number 2, it's not always fun, right? So maybe we just came up with a very poor name for it, but that's the name that we have, and that's the title of today's talk. So we're definitely going to be going with gamification right now. But people are using it just about everywhere. And unfortunately, a lot of times they're failing. Many of you might have seen stats like Gartner says that by 2014, 80% of current gamified applications will fail to meet their business objectives, primarily due to poor design. And in fact, they came out with that stat about 2 or 3 years ago. So someone asked them to say, well, now we know how to do it much better. Can you rerun your numbers? So they reran the numbers and they said, nope, sorry, 80% still failing, and that just came out, I think it was about a month ago. So right now, we're still on target to have 80% of our gamification projects fail. So now, does that mean that when you vote, you should vote that gamification is a bad idea? I will suggest to you that that is not what it's saying. And here's my analogy for why. If any of you have been to a great restaurant, a wonderful chef can take some very, very simple ingredients and turn them into a masterpiece that you will be remembering for the rest of your life. It might not even be fancy ingredients. They might not have used black truffle oil and sturgeon caviar. They might have used, look at the pizza, which I thought was pretty good, right? I mean, it was cheese and crust and a few vegetables or some meat or whatever flavor you had. But yet, somehow, if you put things together in the right combinations, in the right way, with a little love and tender care, it turns out to be wonderful. And yet, if you take those same ingredients and put them in the wrong hands, you get a trip to the emergency room. And they probably are gamifying the emergency room too to make that much more fun, right? I don't know if I want frequent flyer points in the emergency room, but maybe they'll give me some points for sitting still while they take my blood, and they'll give me some points for filling out my insurance profile and pulling out my insurance card. Doesn't matter. If you have food poisoning, it's still a disaster. So my message to you today is that gamification can be the answer to many of our problems if we hire a chef, or if we become a chef, to design the gamification system around it. On the other hand, if you put it in this gentleman's hands, it's probably going to be one of those 80% that Gartner says is going to fail. So the question becomes, how do we do it? Well, if you just read the popular press, it's kind of like fast food and donuts, right? We just give them points, right? We can just make it really easy, and we can use some of these really, really simple techniques, right? We'll give them a badge, and we'll give them an avatar that they can customize, and they'll feel really, really good, and they'll do more of it. They'll be engaged. And if any of you eat at McDonald's or grab some of these wonderful goodies that I found some photos of, they really do feel good in the short term, right? I love a good donut in the morning for breakfast, or some good cheesecake for dessert after dinner. But after a little while, you're going to be feeling the pain. So those are short-term solutions. And one of the reasons why it's been such a challenge to overcome this kind of stuff is because eating that donut really does feel good in the short term. And so when you're filling out your card, in fact, I'm almost glad we're doing the poll tonight so that you'll still be feeling the donut. Everything feels great, right? Oh yeah, my gamification, it worked. I'm so psyched. Here, fill out send the check to your consultant of choice, and you're all thrilled, and you go back to your company and you've got this new gamification, and you're all happy for the first quarter's numbers maybe. But then what happens? And for gamification to really be the powerful tool that it can be, we need to take much more of a long-term perspective. And that's what's missing when we treat gamification like a fast food meal. And I found this, I might be violating somebody's copyright because I think that's definitely a clever cartoon. But anyway, just don't tell anybody. This is what we get when we only think about implementing it on the short term, the surface level. Anyway, I think that speaks for itself, so I will just go on to the next step. So this is where I come to gamification from. Gamification is about motivation. If people are motivated to do something, they will do more of it. How can we motivate people to do what as a business or as a designer or as a doctor if we're gamifying healthcare, or as a parent if we're gamifying our children's household chores? How, as the designer or the owner of the system, do we get people to do more of what we want them to do? And the answer to that is motivation. But motivation is a little bit more complicated than just saying, rah, rah, go team, which is what many gamification implementations seem to be like. One of the standard ways that we gamify is points. That is one of those short-term, extrinsic, fast food gamification solutions that feel really good when you get some points, right? You all get 10 points. I'm going to give you all 10 points for coming here tonight. And if you ask a question, I'm going to give you 10 bonus points. And if you vote up, I'm going to give you 20 extra bonus points, right? That's sort of cheating because I'm just paying you, really, to do what I want you to do, whether you really care about it or not, right? So I might be motivated by getting all those points. You might be motivated in the short term for getting those points, but in the long term, we're not really doing anything. And those are those 80% of gamification projects that fail. So one thing that we can do is we can look at the literature on motivation and say, what really is motivation? What's long-term motivation? And this is a traditional model called self-determination theory, which looks at intrinsic motivation. What makes people motivated really, really, really deep down inside, not points, not the cheap stuff, not the short-term stuff. And in this particular model of motivation, it comes down to things like mastery. You want to be good at something. You feel good when you're good at something? I feel good when I'm good at something. If I feel like I'm doing a good job today, I don't need any points for it. I'm going to feel good anyway, and I'm going to be motivated to do more of it. We're also motivated by autonomy. I'm here because I want to be. If someone was forcing me to be here, if there were a set of police officers outside, and the only way that I could avoid jail tonight was by coming down here and giving you this talk, I might be good at it, but I'm still not necessarily going to be motivated by it, right? Maybe in the short term, perhaps, so I can avoid jail time, but not really. So feeling in control of your life is also very motivating. And then there's relatedness. We're also being motivated by interacting with people. So those are three core dimensions of motivation. And this has been around for 35 years now. So it does have a lot to it. But there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more motivations that we've uncovered since then. So how do we get a grasp of, well, what are all the different motivations? Maybe those 3 motivations that we looked at earlier are all well and good, but they don't fit my process that I want to gamify. So what if I can't use that? So is there more that we can do? So, so where I come to gamification is about trying to understand what are all the motivations that we can draw on to gamify, terrible word, but that's the one we have, a process so that people are motivated intrinsically so that they want to do it. And when they want to do it, it can be successful in the long term. And if we use fundamental motivators to connect what people want to do anyway to what we want them to do as designers or business owners, then that is what's going to drive long-term performance. So that's where I come to this. So here's a really scary looking slide which has lots of different kinds of motivations. And to tell you the truth, this isn't even all of them. These are just the ones that I like to use when I'm helping organizations gamify processes, because it hits kind of the major categories. The relatedness category I kind of shared with you just a moment ago, but there's a lot of subcategories involved. Relatedness is interacting with other people, right? And there's a lot of different ways that we can interact with other people. I can bond with a valued colleague. That motivates me. I enjoy bonding with a valued colleague. Maybe you don't. There's different motivators for different people. It's another thing we'll have to talk about a little bit. So this is just a list of things that might motivate some of our customers or some of our employees. I also might just want to belong to the cool crowd. And I don't even care if they know my name, as long as I feel like I belong, as long as they let me in the door. They give me a name tag, right? I get to wear the pin, right? So I feel like I'm one of the crowd. And that makes me feel good, and I'm motivated, and that's going to encourage me to do more things to help me do that more, or to become that in the first place. Sometimes I might want to collaborate with other people in my group. You know, I am I'll give you an example in just a moment, an open source developer, and I want to work with other open source developers to contribute to this open source code to make this great thing. And I'm working with you, and you're working with me, and we're working together, and this feels great. Also works again in the kitchen, where you have 2 people and they're contributing. Oh, I want to put a little bit more salt in the soup, and oh, I want to put a little bit more pepper, and we're working together, and together we're going to make it work, and that's motivating. Some people are motivated by competition. Now, this kind of competition is not the kind where you get badges and trophies. We'll see that come down later. This is competition where I know you, and you and I have a relationship, and I want to compete with you. It's more of a friendly version of competition. I play Scrabble with my sister-in-law all the time, right? And she tries to beat me in Scrabble, and it's not that we want to win at Scrabble, it's that that's the relationship that we have, right? So that's something that can be motivating. People are also motivated by a nurturing kind of environment. Some of you have the parent figure, not just with your kids, but with your employees, with your customers, and with everybody else. You want to be the mentor or the mommy character. And that's very motivating to many people. And the ones that I have in the parentheses at the bottom of each category, those are kind of the intrinsic one. Some people are motivated just by having 5,000 friends on Facebook, and they don't actually know any of them. They just want to be able to say, "Oh, I got 5,000," right? And that's kind of the cheap one. That's why it's in parentheses, but it is there. Then there's different kinds of mastery, right? I mentioned earlier, mastery is being good at something. This particular subcategory of mastery is being known for being good at something. But there's actually different ways of that too. Having your successes heralded in song. I always think of Monty Python and the Holy Grail with Sir Lancelot, and the minstrel is walking behind him singing the song, "He's the Lancelot, the Knight of the Round Table," and all that. And everybody knows his name, and he's famous, and everybody says, "Oh, he's the great Knight of the Round Table." And some people are very motivated by being really good at that and being known for being really good at something. But there's some people who don't really care if anybody knows who they are, as long as what they did gets some external validation. I think of this one as being the samurai model. People know a samurai did it, and it was really successful. Nobody knows the guy's name, or her name if they were female samurais. I heard a debate on NPR the other day of whether or not there were. But they just want to know that what they did is appreciated as being really, really skillful. But it doesn't matter to them if anybody knows it was them, as long as they know that it was externally validated, that it was actually a good thing. Most of my consulting life is like that, because I work with a company and their stock price skyrockets and they get world famous as being really, really good at something, and nobody remembers how much I helped. But I know, and that's all that matters to me. So that's where I fit on this table. And then there's, and this is another NPR, I think I listen to NPR a lot, the ninja model. And the ninja model, they go into a city, they assassinate the leader, and nobody even knows they were assassinated. Everyone thinks it was natural causes, because it was some kind of hidden poison, right? So nobody even knows that they did anything, except they know. And they know it worked because nobody knows. So the whole point of it, of them being really good, is that nobody will ever know they did it. I kind of do this as a teaching model. My students go out and become really famous at what they do. Some of them never even call. But I know that something about their success, maybe I had something to do with it. And as long as I know, that's all I need. And then, of course, the extrinsic version of that, the cheap version, is we can just give people trophies and leaderboards, whether they're really good or not. We can just give them a trophy and they feel really good about it. Again, short-term extrinsic version, so that's in parentheses. Some people like accumulating stuff. Now, you probably know someone who gets a shot glass from every city they visit, and they've got like a curio cabinet with 500 of them on the shelf, right? And they want to have one from every city, or one from every state in the country, or one from, they just get that joy of accumulating all these sets, right? Some people are motivated by that. And then the virtual goods, we can do that online by just having them. But you know, a lot of people cheat with that, right? They pay someone to go collect all the virtual goods for them, put it in their trophy case, and then they take credit for it all. So that's why that one's in parentheses. Next column, some people want to be competent. Now, competent is relative to internal benchmarks rather than external benchmarks. So that's not the same as mastery. Mastery, we want to be good at something that, you know, society kind of sets the level for what success means. Competence is kind of an internal. So that's why it includes not just being good at something, but following a code of honor. And you know, charitable works kind of fall into that category. Tranquility and fairness and justice and idealism. So for example, the extrinsic version of that being badges, everybody can have a badge for going to McDonald's. We've probably all been there once, right? So there's no competition regarding that, but some people might want to do that. Some people are motivated by self-expression. We all have a little bit of artist in us, right? So we want to be able to maybe customize your avatar, right? Find out what its clothes are going to be like and give it some tattoos and make them look like this. And maybe it's a 5th level elf in the World of Warcraft, or maybe it's your knowledge management system avatar that's a workplace gamification project. But there's a lot of self-expression. That's not me, so I have a harder time describing that one. I have no self-expressive capabilities whatsoever. But I do have to recognize that a lot of people are motivated by that, because if I'm gamifying a process for a company or for an organization, I need to know that many of their users might be motivated by that. Now, this last one is the hardest one to understand. Some people are motivated by disruption. A lot of kids are probably like that. But disruption doesn't necessarily mean bad. White hat hackers fall into that mode too. They're trying to disrupt because they want to find holes, so then they can tell the people who make the software to fix the holes, right? So they just enjoy looking for the problems. They don't necessarily want to take advantage of them. Black hat hackers also fall into that category also. So there are some people who actually are using it for the forces of evil. But there are some people who just like disrupting, and that's something that motivates them. Now, if we can funnel that disruptive motivation into something that's productive, then we can actually use it for a good thing. Now, unfortunately, everybody's different. So we can't just say, okay, given my process, I'm going to pick 3 of those motivations, and I'm going to use them, and that's how I'm going to motivate all my customers, or all my users, or all my employees, or all my children. We can't do that because everybody is motivated by some different set of combinations. We have one person who's motivated by a lot of community, a little bit of competence, a medium amount of relatedness, another person by a lot of status, a little bit of competition, a little bit. So we need to design our systems so that it can cover all different kinds of motivations. So different people can be motivated by different things and still contribute to the overall process. Now, This is just one example. I don't know if any of you are involved in Strava. It's a social network for cyclists. And this is just some of the ways, and I'm not a cyclist, so I just kind of pulled this from what I know about Strava. It's a case study that I worked on. They have actually taken at least 80% of the motivators on my list and found ways of implementing these in there so that different people who might be motivated by different things can still join Strava and gain some benefit from it. And so Strava can grow as a social network and they achieve their business goals. The cyclists can achieve their own personal goals by achieving all of these different motivations. Now they do have some points, but points is actually a very, very small part of the Strava social network. They have lots of other things. They have, of course, you can put in your personal record for how much time it took you to bike down a certain route. They also have trash talking chat rooms where if you have a person that you're linked to one-on-one, you can get that one-on-one mastery relatedness. They have ways of disrupting, like for example, when a group goes together, you can draft off each other and try to get a little bit of speed up so you can get an artificially fast time. They have lots and lots of different ways that someone can be motivated, and they don't need everybody to be motivated in the same way. And they can have different people motivated by different things working together. So for example, if one person has the mentoring, nurturing motivation, they can actually give tips to somebody who wants to learn so they can get better, so they can compete. So they can match up someone with a mentoring, nurturing motivation, someone with a competition, I want to beat the pants off somebody motivation, hook them up and allow both of them to satisfy the motivation that they are both interested in individually and be able to use the Strava network to achieve that. So two people, different motivations can be linked together in the Strava social network, both get what they want. Strava wins as well because they're using the Strava network. I'm involved in a project right now. This one is actually for Drupal, which is a content management system I'm sure many of you are familiar with. We're trying to understand what motivates people to contribute to Drupal, because right now developers contribute 80%, I think, compared, and UX, there's like 2 people, 2% of the contributors are contributing to UX. Why not? Well, they're not getting paid for it, so there's no extrinsic motivation. They don't feel like they're one of the in-group, because the in-group are all developers. So the relatedness motivation isn't there. They have the relatedness motivator, but they're not getting it. So they don't want to contribute for that reason. They're not made to feel competent because nobody gives them any credit for being good at what they do. Because the developers care about how elegant your code is. They don't care if you're contributing some elegant UX design. So no matter what the UX designers, or other kind of designers for that matter, no matter what their motivation is, they can't find it in the Drupal community. At least not very much, which is why they're not getting as much participation. So we're trying to overcome that problem by looking at what are all the different motivations that people have in the open source community, and is there a way that we can find a way to implement these better so that people contribute more, they benefit from contributing and to be able to satisfy their motivations, and Drupal will benefit by having a better UX. So it becomes the win-win kind of contribution. But here's the problem. If we now take, I've only shared with you motivation, because that's my area and that's my passion. Being passionate about motivation. I don't know if that's an oxymoron, but if we look at all the different kinds of motivations, we can look at all the different kinds of player profiles, we can look at all the different kinds of processes that might need gamifying, we can look at all the different kinds of use cases that are out there in which we need to apply this kind of stuff. We can look at all the different kind of time frames. We might have 1-day projects and 1-week projects and 1-month projects and 1-year projects. We can look about different learning curves, because obviously if there's something like an edu-game that's being gamified, or I try to gamify my courses at Bentley, the students have different learning curves, different kinds of feedback. Some people need feedback right away. Some people want the feedback to be distributed slowly. Different kinds of rewards. Some people are going to want rewards that are a little bit more tangible. Some people are going to want more intangible rewards, and so on. Different models of how much customization should there be, and so on and so on. Each one of these has 10, 100, 200. How many motivations did I just share with you? I think I had 30 on that screen. If we multiply 30 motivations times 20 player profiles times 50 processes times, I figured it was probably about 6,423,678,100, or 6 quadrillion, I guess. Anyway, a whole lot of combinations. I just made that number up. But there's a lot. How are we possibly going to figure out how to gamify any kind of system when there's 6 quadrillion possible ways of gamifying a system, if we really want to accommodate everything? It's not easy. So if someone says, I can do it to you, I can gamify your process for $59.95, just buy my platform, you plug in 3 default settings, and you're done. I'm guessing that those are going to fall onto the 80% of gamification projects that Gartner says are going to fail. But luckily there is, so this is what we feel like when we look at that. So what can we actually do? Well, this is a very, very simplistic version of the model, but hopefully you can find someone who really knows what they're doing. And essentially what we need to do is we need to take the business objectives, because we always want to know that this is where we want to end up, and the different user profiles, because we should have some idea of who it is that we're designing this for. If we're designing household chores, we know our kids. If this is for employees, we know who our employees are. If this is for a university, we know who our student population is. If we're designing for cyclists, there's a somewhat limited number of kind of profiles among cyclists. We can put those together and we can figure out what game elements do we need to implement in the system that's going to engage these profiles to pursue these business objectives. And then for those elements, what are the mechanics for implementing them? How are we going to turn those mechanics into a user interface that the players will then see and interact with? And how is that going to plug and chug through their brain, which is my area of academic expertise? If any of you were here when I gave my talk, what was it, about a year and a half ago or so, I gave a talk actually on brain science. So that's where I come from motivation from, is actually understanding how the brain is wired to see why it works that way. So when people are interacting with that user interface, it's making different things happen up here in their emotional side, and with their memories and their information processing areas. Something is happening up there which is going to have them engage in different short-term behaviors. And based on those short-term behaviors, we need to change the game dynamics. And game dynamics is, how does it change over time? Maybe I gave you 1 point for that yesterday. It's going to take you 2 points today, because you already figured out how to do it. But maybe I see you're struggling, so now I'm going to bump it back down to 1 point so that you don't get demotivated, right? So we need to worry about how the game mechanics change over time, which is the very simple way of saying game dynamics. And then how that loop is going to repeat over and over again as the person is working through the process to try to change long-term behavior. Whether that long-term behavior is, now I'm contributing to my employer's knowledge management system on a regular basis because I'm loving it. Or I'm following my exercise plan that originally was a real pain in the butt, New Year's resolution, but now I'm loving it. Or now I'm doing my chores, maybe I don't love it, but I'm at least doing it because now I'm feeling part of the family and I'm doing my responsibility, and so forth. So if you have someone who actually knows how to put all these different things together, which is what you'll hear about for the next 30 minutes, then it can actually work. So my message here is that gamification can work. And this is the slide at ES that we put together a list of the pros and cons to put up for discussion at the end. So I think you'll see this again. But gamification will work if we take a long-term view. We think about intrinsic motivations. We focus the users on the key outcomes, and try to encourage people to use their disruptive tendencies for white hat reasons. It doesn't work when we try to do things using short-term solutions, using things like contestification and pointsification and badgification. Those are all pejorative terms for this. Distracting users by giving them extrinsic rewards that don't really mean anything, in which case we get people who are disruptors by just trying to get points to get free stuff, and they don't really get engaged in the first place. So thank you very much. I guess I'm giving this back to Charles, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mark. Now we're going to hear from Ankit.
All right, I'm just going to be very honest with you guys. I probably haven't slept in about 2 days. When I was putting together this talk, I was trying to think what I really wanted to present to you, what I wanted to bring to you. When I started talking to Mark and seeing what he was going to present, I realized he was going to present a lot of what gamification is and how we start thinking about it strategically. So what I wanted to bring to you guys is a little bit of everything. It's a mishmash. I'm going to kind of take it as it comes, but hopefully you guys get something out of it. So first things first. Before you guys walked in here, how many people knew what gamification was? Everybody? So no reason for me to continue? Okay. So how many people here have actually worked with a gamification program or tried to implement one? So a pretty fair amount also. So knowing that, I think we can start delving a little bit into what people say. So really, really boring stuff out of the way first. So Gartner, which I never ever read, and I advise nobody else does either, says that 70% of the world's top 2,000 companies will be using gamification in some form by 2014. Look, that's now. Everybody knows what gamification is here. At least 50% of you raised your hands, so it looks like this is somewhat accurate. They also say by next year, more than 50% of organizations that manage innovation processes will gamify those processes. Also, very popular statistic, people who are gamification advocates are always like, rah, rah, gamification all the time. Doesn't quite work. Let's first define what gamification is to me. So a little bit of background in what I do. I work as a strategy consultant that works not only in the gamification space, but also in the behavior space. So I help large-scale organizations, enterprises, nonprofits design gamification strategies. And the way I do it is a little bit different than just saying, hey, I'm going to come in and give you some points, give you some badges, and make some other things happen for you. So how do I define it? I say gamification is the process of using game thinking and mechanics to engage users. Really what we're after here is to identify who the users are and engage them. And it's not just about these things that pop up in front of your face, but it's the entire design that comes behind that we borrow from games and a few other venues. So we know what it is, and Mark shared this statistic, but it's really, really interesting to know why this happens. Well, it's going to fail because it's due to poor design. Why is it poor design? This is the first question you should ask yourself whenever you're thinking about gamification, why things don't work, why they will work. Simply put, they forgot about you guys. They forgot about people. They forgot that when you're designing a program, there's got to be a use case for it. There's got to be people at the end of the day who are actually leveraging and utilizing this platform. And if they're not factored in, frankly, your program sucks. So I'm just going to give you guys some really quick, really, really simple applications in real life that I saw that I just really like. And this is kind of how I got into gamification, because I started seeing things like this, and I was wondering, why did that work? What about it worked? So how many of you guys have heard of the speed camera lottery? A few of you. So in the Nordic countries, people drive fast, just like they do here. So if you drive fast here, what happens to you? Cop pulls you over, you get a ticket, you pay a fine, you get some points, you're not very happy at the end of the day. These guys basically thought, what can we do to change this dynamic? Well, it's kind of interesting what they did. They put this meter up there that offered real-time feedback, which I'm sure all of you have seen, for how fast you're driving. The sensor on this meter clocks you in and checks your license plate. If you're driving below the posted speed limit, you're entered into a lottery where you could potentially win big bucks. Where do those big bucks come from? Well, if you're clocked over, you pay a fine still. But all that money goes to the people who try to actually stay under the speed limit. This program in 1 year reduced the amount of speeding tickets issued by 80%. In 1 year. New Year's just passed. How many people are trying to get back into shape? Just a few of you? I guess a lot of you are already in shape. How many people have used the Nike Fuel Band? One of you. How many people have heard of the Nike Fuel Band? All of you, thank you. So you look at this thing, which is really, really popular. There's been 6-month waiting periods for this thing. You see the meter on top. You see fuel. So one person who's used it over there, what does fuel mean?
The points, basically,
What do the points mean?
from doing the exercise that you registered to do.
Right. So from that kind of explanation, points mean nothing. In this thing, it's basically showing you that either you're going forward or you're going backward. There's no number attached to this. There's no, you got 100 points, 200 points. It's not like how many calories you burned. It's not how many steps you've taken. It's just some general metric that people have aggregated together to say, hey, look, you're progressing. How is that popular? I guess people just want to know that they're doing better. So it's really interesting to think that a lot of the mechanics and the things that we think about being really, really specific, and this is true in our actual applications for business cases, are more about transcribing feelings to people, transcribing progress to people, not necessarily in a big data metric type of way, but more about just how you're making people feel about going forward. This touches on the motivation that Marc was talking about before, but it also touches on a little bit more than that. It touches on some of the mastery he was discussing too, and just feeling that you're not stuck where you are. So my particular favorite is this. So Games for Change, this is called Foldit. So Foldit is a really interesting example. There was a virus closely associated with AIDS. It was called the Mason-Pfizer monkey virus. The Mason-Pfizer monkey virus, it's a mouthful, had a protein structure that people could not figure out. Scientists struggled for 15 years trying to develop what the protein structure for this thing would be. If we could figure it out, we'd be able to help prevent many, many different AIDS cases within Africa. 15 years, absolutely no progress. So they created a game out of it, a crowdsourced game that people could start using, play on their own, contribute different ways that proteins could fold, and try to solve this problem. Anybody have an idea how long it took to solve and actually get the structure for this protein? How much? 3 months. Anybody else? 10 days. A problem that baffled scientists for 15 years took 10 days worth of game playing to actually figure out and deliver results. So that one actually is a social good, which is why I love that example so much, but also because the results are so drastic when you do things properly. How many people eat at McDonald's? I have like the healthiest group here. How many people have played this game? Well, if you won the $1 million, you probably wouldn't be here. But this game is immensely popular. It is by far the most profitable thing that McDonald's does year after year after year. Why does it work? It's just a board game. You can buy this thing at home. Parker Brothers is more than happy to sell you something for $14.99. But you go here to play this because it motivates the actions that McDonald's wants from you, and it potentially rewards you for them in a very simplistic manner. Something this simple shouldn't work, right? People should be wise to it. People should be smart to it. But from a very primary level, things like this actually do work in terms of onboarding, getting people in the door. And how we maintain them later is something that I'm going to cover. So really the question that people are going to ask when they're here, and they're here for the UX part of it, can gamification change your particular world? And really, what does it come down to do this? Well, in the large scale, we don't really care about the game elements. We care about people's behavior and how the game elements actually interact with that. So if we're not focused on people, we're not focused on what their behaviors actually are, and if we don't understand what they are, this is going to fail. This is in that 80% category. So let's talk brass tacks. How do we actually do this? Well, first question. That's how you got to start every single time. If you guys are ever trying to do a gamification platform or a program, first question you must ask. How do I get people to do stuff more often? Right? All this stuff is all about driving action. The motivation drives action. The behaviors drive action. We just want people to do it more often, and hopefully we benefit from it. Hopefully they benefit from it. So when we talk about motivating people, and Marc covered a good portion of this, but we're basically trying to say that we have two types of motivation that we're going to play around with here. We have intrinsic motivation. We have extrinsic motivation. Names are kind of obvious. One's internal, one's external. So internally, this is the powerful stuff. This is the stuff that makes you wake up every morning, that motivates you, that drives you. You want to be smart. All of us want to be successful. We want to be valued by our peers. I'm giving this talk. I hope you guys like it, right? This is all about social value for me. And there's got to be some structure, which hopefully I'm providing. And then there's the extrinsic stuff, the caffeine high, if you will. Going to a casino, having somebody give you a badge. That's just a reward. You get stuff that you want. One seems to be a little bit deeper than the other. But believe it or not, when we come to design, both actually end up being important. So why does it work? There's key motivators that really we can identify for the business case that really work. What's your status? Where are you right now? At work, on a team, on a project? How are you progressing? Am I being recognized? If you're doing work and your boss doesn't care, you're not moving the needle whatsoever, you're not motivated. You might as well just stay home. There's no reason to come there besides collecting a paycheck. Are you making progress? How do you compare? The guy in the next cubicle over, the guy in the next office over? You all want to be better than him, right? Let's be honest. Are you? Well, how can you really tell? And are you winning? This game that you're playing, the job that you're doing, the design experience that you want, the programs you want to build, are they successful? Are you winning? So gamification is just a layer that we're going to put over the engaging experiences that you already have. It's built on top of, it's not necessarily a brand new program, but it's built on top of things that you guys already do on a daily basis. So here we're going to look customer facing. We're enhancing simply what you got, and we're going to use a bunch of different mechanics to do so. So we're going to reward users, we're going to elevate their status, we're going to give them context. And just to give you a few examples, game mechanics that we can use, things like the badges that you see there, reputation mechanics that we can use, telling people that they're progressing, giving them a higher level, level 1, level 2, level 3. Social mechanics, these things are a little bit more subtle, but we're going to surface behaviors and achievements in context. If I give you a badge at work, what does it mean when you go home? Absolutely nothing. These things are only significant in context, and it's really important to engage with this when you're designing. So how do we apply these game mechanics to actually change behavior? And again, going customer facing. Here's the three kind of imperatives that we've identified that the customer challenge really, really represents. How do we acquire customers? How do we retain the customers that we have over time? And how do we convert these customers into getting paid? If we're able to focus on these three things, we've successfully had the framework and the skeleton for a successful gamification program, as long as we can understand what these things are. So let me give you a few real business examples. Autodesk is a software company that builds CAD, CAM software. So they realized that when they were having a trial, people opened it one time and they thought it was way too complicated to use, no conversion. Nobody can get this thing to be successful, so they thought, what if we gamify it? Well, essentially what they did is they took their software and turned it into a guided tour. As you achieve mastery, as you actually start using the software, you do something really simple, you were rewarded for it. You were told that you were doing well, you progressed further. The next step, same thing. And slowly you were able to see yourself progress and get better and better at the software. When they did this, they had 2 times the conversions within 30 days. They effectively doubled the amount of software they were selling simply within 30 days because they guided people through the experience and gave them real-time feedback. I'll go through that. Sneak Peek was another client who, basically, if you've seen any sort of clothing site, if you've seen a Gilt, if you've seen other things that often use this kind of countdown model, they wanted to basically increase people coming to the site, staying there. They wanted to understand better how to make money, how to grow their revenue. So basically coming in and putting in some of these simple elements that built community, that built retention, some of the mechanics that we've talked about previously, within 30 days gave them these types of results. Their social shares went up almost 600%. Their daily retention for the employees that they had went up 40%. And their conversions actually increased by 18%. And keep in mind, some of these numbers are modest, some of them are extraordinary, but all of this happened within 30 days. Continuing this track, they significantly went even past these numbers. So how do we get started, right? And that's kind of what we need to know if we're going to put one of these programs in. So gamification might not be the greatest word. That's what we're all here for, but the wrong audiences just get the wrong context. People think it's playing a game. People don't understand that it's borrowing mechanics, borrowing ideas from the game world and other worlds, but they just think, oh, are you turning my experience into playing a video game? That's not what it's about. If you're selling a gamification program, if I'm consulting on a gamification program, it's all about behavior management and delivering results. It's about understanding the behaviors that we can do. Things aren't simple anymore. If you think about all the touch points that we have for a customer these days, for people that use any sort of programs these days, think about all the ways that we can actually interact and understand the data about them. They're rating products on Yelp. They're rating experiences on Yelp. They're completing orders. They're getting FAQs. They're helping answer a question. They're posting a status message on Facebook, on Twitter, all sorts of different things. They're signing up for different things. They're trying them. They're socially sharing. They're submitting product feedback. They're writing reviews. They're doing discussions on Reddit, other places. All these things need to be captured or understood in some way. And this is where gamification is actually a really important point, because for some, it's the flavor of the month. Just like big data was the flavor of the month, just like design thinking was the flavor of the month. But from a UX perspective, all these things work hand in hand. They're part of a design toolbox that helps us capture all these things, design appropriately to understand them, and then actually deliver results at the end. So, like I'm saying, it's more than just the points, the badges, and leaderboards. We're going, it's just understanding the human psyche, how people think, and understanding their behavior. And when we do this in practice, when we do this as a consultant, when we do this in a business perspective, we have this maniacal focus on value and on delivery. You never do a gamification problem or program until you have a business problem. If you're going to just start a gamification program for the hell of it, it's going to fail. You start with something specific in mind, which is always the first thing that we do. We say, what do you want to do? What kind of lift do you want? Do you want to reduce turnover with your employees? Do you want to raise your revenue by 50%? Many different things that you can accomplish. But once we get something tangible, once we get the KPIs, then we know which direction these programs can be designed in. And then, of course, we measure them. When we start measuring, we know what the lift is. We know what we've done. And the beauty of this is that this program is not static. Things change over time. And because of that, the one thing that I really, really need to stress is you're not going to build a gamification program ever and be done. You're going to have to iterate. It's iteration after iteration after iteration. It's balancing. It's understanding what's happening now and constantly moving forward to the next state. The final product is, simply put, from a game perspective, meant to engage, delight, and even surprise users. This experience should be fun. As overused as that word is, it actually is meaningful here. So some business cases we went through show a little bit about some of the mechanics and some of the things that we talked about and Mark talked about. But I want to take this a little bit deeper. So how many guys here have heard of Coursera? How many guys have actually taken a course on Coursera? How many people have completed a course on Coursera? These numbers keep dwindling, right? So let me tell you about one of the initiatives we worked on. This is my old boss. This is Kevin Werbach. He's a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. He built a gamification course on Coursera, which at the end of the day ended up becoming one of the most popular courses of all time. So let me just give you a couple of statistics. To build this course, in the background, usually other universities have taken $30,000 to $50,000 per course. 4 to 6 months of instructor time have been devoted into this thing. 2 to 3K in software and equipment, big buckets of work, developing, recording the videos, developing the lesson plan, developing the entire syllabi. Well, we had an empty office and a webcam and no budget whatsoever to do this. So we didn't have a leg up on how people usually do these things. So we thought, how do we structure this course in a different way? So let's go into that a little bit. So Wharton, 132 years old, 11 different academic departments, 20 research centers with 240 faculty, and close to $1 billion in an endowment. 92,000 alumni have been produced in the 132 years. One professor with one graduate assistant. 2 sessions of the same course and simply 1 webcam. In that same period of time, we covered 140,000 students. 1 semester. So, to tell you a little bit about our success, 81,600 registrations. You guys can read the slide. Massive engagement. We really, really had people participating. Over 2 million video views, over almost 20,000 forum posts, 187,000 peer assessments, people actually talking and grading to each other, huge amounts of tweets, Facebook mentions. And all of these things came with challenges. So again, anytime you take a new course, you don't know what it is. You don't know what it is when you're going into it. You don't know how you're going to think about it, how you're going to use it, how you're going to implement it. Nobody knew what gamification was when we first launched this. Everybody saw this thing. They thought it was going to be about video games. And they signed up. How did we manage to keep them? Well, we started thinking about what courses are really like. So traditionally, if you think about what an educational experience is like, it's all about intensity level. So you're going to have a week of work. You're going to have homework. You're going to have studying, homework, studying, whatever. It's all pretty flat. Suddenly the intensity level is ratcheted up when you have a midterm. You go from here, being really calm, sky high. It's a hard situation to deal with in terms of keeping people, acquiring them, and retaining them, because anytime you run into something that's significantly different from what came before, you have a drop-off. Same thing, you go back down, your final comes up, you're getting really, really stressed, you're pulling all-nighters, you have all sorts of crazy things happening that make people just not want to do the work. So we thought, what can we borrow from games to make this a little bit different? So people who even play recreational games, people who've played Tetris, Candy Crush, you start easy, right? You slowly progress yourself and you get more difficult as time goes on. And you do it in a way that makes people not realize that the level of difficulty is changing so drastically. So player journey, taking somebody from being a newbie to being a master, is all about scaffolding. It's about starting really, really low, slowly bringing them up, leveling them out for a while, bringing them up a little further, leveling them out for a while, bringing them up, leveling them out for a while, until you finally get to a peak where you achieve what your goals are. So we said, how do we put this into what we did for the class? Well, this is how we actually designed the class, and this is game thinking. Because there were no overt mechanics in this class. We didn't award any badges, no points, no leaderboards, nothing of the sort. We simply just thought, we're going to let people come on. We're going to give them a very, very easy 2-question quiz. Okay, they got used to that. We're going to give them a 3-question quiz. They got used to that. We're going to give them a 3-question quiz plus a small project to do at the same time. We're going to keep them there for a little while. We're going to eventually take them to the highest peak. And then the ending section was the same thing. You know, we kept them relatively high, but by this point, they had successfully completed the class. So let me ask you guys a question. The typical MOOC, the typical massive online open course on Coursera, what's the completion rate? What percentage of 140,000 students took this course? What percentage actually completed the course on average? Any guesses? How much? 80. Anyone else? 5? 10? Huh? Of all courses. In general, the average, yeah. 10%. The average completion rate for a Coursera course to this day is 3%. So they have massive numbers that say 140,000, 200,000 people have signed up for a course. Literally, no one finishes a course because of the kind of design that I told you about, where they simply find things to be too challenging. These courses are free. You're not indebted to taking the course. You didn't pay for it. So if things get really hectic, your basement floods one day, like mine did yesterday, or your kid's crying, or you're just really tired and you want to go to sleep, you'll avoid these things. But if you sufficiently understand motivation and you build it into the game design thinking, you can actually retain people. So let me give you some results that we had. Our completion rates ended up being somewhere around 13 to 14%, which was a significant multiple. And again, nothing overt, simply just staging the course in such a way that we were able to do a 2 to 4x on completion rates. And this is our way of just doing game thinking. This kind of stuff works, not only from a very overt point of view, but I hope something that you guys take away from this is that it can work from just thinking about problems and how to actually implement gamification strategically. So to wrap it up, just a quick take-home message. Game thinking, not just gamification, but thinking in the context of games and thinking about progression and behavior is a powerful thing. It's definitely the key to understanding behavior, but keep in mind it's just one tool in the toolbox. The other things that you guys already do on a day-to-day basis, what actually drives and delivers the business objectives in the programs, matter first. And if you use gamification well, you'll definitely succeed. So if you guys want more resources, by the way, the largest media site on the web is called gamification.co. You'll find tons of articles, research, studies, user experiences, all on this site in an easily digestible kind of newspaper blog format. And if you guys want to get in touch, you guys can tweet me or just email me at ankit@dopa.mn. Thank you.
Okay, what I'd like to do is open to questions to the two speakers. Who would like to start?
I think we answered all your questions so well.
Go ahead, Andy.
When you're trying to measure the metrics for success, how do you set them up so that people have higher expectations? And one of the things that happens, you talk about how 80% of these, according to Gartner, have failed. Now, they failed. What are the metrics or standards by which they failed? Is it because no one used them, they were badly used, or they underperformed compared to what people were expecting? So, how do you set up the metrics of performance, and how do you temper or manage those expectations?
You want to go? You want me to? Okay. I think Ankit said right from the beginning, you don't even start a gamification project without already knowing what the business objectives of the project is. So that should be your measure of success. If you want the end result to be a 20% increase in sales or a 30% increase in shares or a 50% increase in repeat customers, then that is the metric. And you're trying to design all the processes underlying that to reach that goal. Now, you might want to set yourself at a green success and maybe a yellow level of success. So if you set your success rate at 50% and you get 49, you're not going to say, oh, it failed, we're never going to try it again. But you would want to know that if it goes up 10%, was it worth the money to change things around, to invest in setting up the project? So it's a business decision rather than just a all or nothing. What Gartner used to come up with that number, as Ankit said, I didn't read the whole report because I don't take them as being the authority on whether projects succeed or fail. But before going into the project, you should have that predefined so that when you do get 6 months in and you're now coming to a measurement of whether it's working or not, you actually have a benchmark already set to decide that by.
Now, what I'm getting at is how do you know if that's a realistic benchmark? Because sometimes you have business leaders who are totally clueless and they throw a number out, which given what the capabilities are out there based on the way the market behaves and acts, to say that you're going to get a 50% increase, that's not necessarily reasonable or even remotely sane.
And Kit, you want to take that one actually? Because you get that kind of question in business all the time.
We definitely get that kind of question all the time. The important thing to stress is, aside from having a business objective up front, these programs are living, breathing beings almost. They're things that iterate. So when you're actually designing a program, I can guarantee you, the first time you'll never be successful. It just doesn't happen in practice. There's too many moving parts. There's too many things that don't work well the first time because you don't understand your users as well as you think you do until they actually start going through the system and you start collecting data. So the best way to kind of stress this, and how we always stress it to clients, is that our first step is always just understanding what we're trying to build and what kind of lift we're looking for. Are we trying to move the needle at all? Or a lot, basically a lot. And whenever people say a lot, I say, is that really realistic? You haven't been able to do movement by pulling normal levers. You want to try something new. Let's see if it actually resonates and reacts. So it's always a very gradated process.
Another question over here. Yes.
Like going to that, utilize application tests.
I'm sorry, couldn't hear you.
Application tests, or just like something similar to the concept, like you take the test, but not order testing give us the same question. It's based on their based on their input, so it's very interactive, very that kind of users input. Is it an adaptation test?
Well,
Adaptive learning test, yeah. What about it?
Based on what you input.
Yeah, it reacts to the inputs that you put in.
Right.
Were you relating that to?
That's one particular sub-application that you might include in a gamification project, but that's not necessarily what they all would be.
Can you talk a little bit more about how, like, tactically or in more detail, how you would use gamification to drive long-term intrinsic motivation rather than just kind of that quick junk food hit?
That's a fantastic question, one I was hoping would be asked.
You want to use the mic, restate the question? Can everyone hear the question? No, restate the question.
So basically he's asking how we appropriately use intrinsic motivation along with the extrinsic motivation, the junk food hit, if you will. So I love that question because it's one I hear all the time. People think it's either or kind of category, but it's not. You can actually leverage extrinsic motivation as a tool to onboard and build intrinsic motivation. So let's use the Nike Fuel Band or almost any fitness program as an example. The first few times that you go to work out, they suck, right? They're not great. You're sweaty, you're tired, you feel like you don't want to go. You gotta get ready, you gotta come home and shower. These things are very, very difficult to continually make into a habit, right? What happens after the first 5 or 6 sessions though? Once it's actually ingrained, they become self-rewarding. You start seeing progress, you see that, oh look at me, like I dropped 5 pounds, I look better, my skin looks better, whatever. That's when it becomes intrinsic. You see continual motivation and you continually get feedback for it. But what started it? Maybe there's a platform like Photocracy or weightlifting.com that initially gave you points, that upped you a level. Again, same thing with the mastery, right? You started at level 1, progressing, which was really easy to get to level 2. Level 2 to 3, a little bit harder, but not that much. 3 to 4, same thing with weightlifting, same thing with working out, same thing with almost any other program that you build. You give people small, achievable wins, and they get the caffeine high. It motivates them to get to the next step. But if you design it correctly, eventually the activity in itself becomes rewarding without me having to reward you anymore in terms of points, badges, things of that nature. So that makes sense?
I think you covered it.
Actually, I have a question for Mark. And you had that chart, that basically the palette of motivational structures up there. How do you approach a real-world problem where you identify from that palette the intrinsic motivators, and how do you prioritize them so that you can give those to the product development team to develop something? Because you presented the whole palette, but what I always find is a problem with gamification is it's not a lack of theory, and it's not a lack of business cases. There are a few good ones. It's how do you take the theory and get it in a practical form that the development team can use. So how do you choose all of those from that huge palette to work with?
Right, that is an excellent question because you have to get somehow from the beginning to the end in a way that works. And what's really critical is there are the underlying business processes that before you even get to gamification that you're trying to get people to do more of, whether it's, I think your slide earlier was really good. Are you trying to get them to share something? Are you trying to get them to buy something? Are you trying them just to try out your company once to see if they like it? Quite frankly, if they don't like the product that you're selling, you shouldn't want gamification to trick them into buying some because that's not the long-term customer that you're looking for anyway. So what we want to do is we want to take what are the actual activities that are based on the fundamental business that we want people to do more of, and then find out what the motivations are that people are coming to the business with, and depending on who your customer targets are, there might be different kinds of profiles you can kind of narrow it down to. And then based on that, if there are particular links. For example, if mastery is going to be something that is really important for people to enjoy using your product, then it's the mastery motivation that you want to leverage. So then you want to specifically say, well, how can we get people to feel that feeling of mastery as they're using the product or the service more and more. So it might be start them out with the junk food hit by giving them something really, really easy as an onboarding tool. But then level 2 gets much harder. Quiz 3, which has a project associated with it. But then when they have now, not only did they pass the quiz, but they also did the project, and they have something to show for that project, now they're really feeling proud of that mastery. So then is there a next step? And in fact, this was one of the problems that I think it was Foursquare had when they were first, they were a game, but it was a gamification process, that people got to the end, and there was nothing else to win. So then what did they do? And so people were engaged by the perception of mastery. They had become mayor of whatever their favorite coffee shop was. And then what do they do? There was nothing left for them to do. So you have to always make sure that there is the next level. And that's when you need to go back to the development team. And that's why it's always an iterative process. Because you're never done. You can never just say, okay, developing group, here's the thing you need to implement, and I'll see you at payday.
Okay.
It just doesn't work that way.
I have one other question for Ankit. Tell us about a failure that you've had personally in the attempt to apply gamification.
There's a lot of them, if I'm going to be completely honest. One that strikes me as particularly painful was being engaged by a large-scale bank. A large-scale bank that had millions of customers who was working with a contact center. So one of the biggest problems that they had in this contact center was the continual leaving of their employees. So as you can imagine, staffing a call center isn't the most engaging work in the world. You were reading a script for most of the time, you had people being rude to you all the time. And there was absolutely no way that people wanted to deal with this in the long term. So we put on our dog and pony show. We said, oh, we know all about the contact center. We'll be able to motivate people, get them to stay there. The reality was, some situations just can't be solved by gamification. No matter how many points, no matter how many rewards we gave them, no matter how much we thought we understood them, we scripted for them, people still left. And we found almost absolutely no, I think it was like 3% increase for all the work and effort we put in over a 6-month period. And that was an absolute failure because from the business objective point of view, the business case wasn't strong enough. We couldn't actually fundamentally change what being a call center employee was like. And so trying to apply almost lipstick on a pig, if you will, didn't make it any better.
So actually, I'm curious about that example. What steps did you go through to get to know them? Like, what was your process in getting to know that particular customer?
So, as with anything, we had a very deep assessment period. So it involved things, if we're going to use a contact center as an example, it involved us actually being on site. It actually involved us going through the experience of what a call center employee goes through on a day-to-day basis. It involved us actually being inside the contact center and watching people, having focus groups. We really took a significant period of time to understand just what they did, almost hour by hour, minute by minute, day by day. Once we thought we had an appropriate background for what these activities were, that's when we started designing. And with a very particular business objective in mind, which was reduce turnover. We knew how much money it cost each single time that an employee left and they had to retrain somebody else. So that's what we were trying to change.
Can I it's a great question. Mark, from your point of view, what did he do wrong?
On the block here.
Right. Well,
These are all unscripted. They didn't know that.
yeah. Part of it is really just understanding what is the underlying, the possible bottlenecks. Because what I find in general, and luckily you didn't ask me to share my failures, so I can kind of skip over that very briefly. But what I find normally to be the cause of a failure of a project like this is there a bottleneck. They hit some ridge where getting to the next level is challenging, but it's not the challenge that is motivating, because you need to have a pretty good expectation of success in order for challenge to be motivating. Nobody wants the big cliff that they need to climb and no rope. Because I might feel really good if I'm able to get up to the top, but I have no way to get up to the top, so I'm just going to give up. And in fact, with the failures, if you do ask me, that'll be my answer. It's usually somewhere in the process, whether it's at onboarding, whether it's getting to the mastery level, somewhere along the line, there's a cliff that's just too steep. And if you don't have some gradual successes that can get them up that cliff, then people just give up. Unfortunately, that's human nature. When we get to something that we don't feel like we can accomplish with a reasonable amount of success, we got other things to do. I can go watch the last episode of Breaking Bad, which I still haven't gotten around to, or we always have better things to do. I can go spend more time with my kids. So the scariest thing is to get to that cliff. And so what we really need to watch out for as it's not even gamification design, because we're not designing gamification, we're just using it as a layer on top of a process, is to try to identify where those cliffs are and then find some easy way around them, the path up the backside, which has the easier trail.
Bonnie?
So, through most of this talk, both talks, I was thinking, this just sounds like good design, not gamification. And in particular, this failure that you're talking about, it seems like rather than gamifying, it might have been, this job sucks, redesign the job process. Okay, like, I mean, when I worked with telephone operators, particular type of telephone operators I worked with, loved their jobs, had very low turnover because they felt like they helped someone every 30 seconds of the day. The help center, mostly they don't. They get rude people because they're not helping.
Right.
Change the job, don't read a script. You know, so why even talk about gamification? Why not just talk about damn good design?
Well, that's sort of the basis of tonight's talk. You know, is it anything other than good
Right.
design?
Is it
really?
anything other than good design?
Well,
Yeah.
I think...
You might have a little thing with some rhythms that work in video games.
Right. I think the real answer to that is you can't, I think Ankit even said, you can't put lipstick on a pig, right? Yes, you do need to have the right design first. And if the design is bad, you're much better off putting your resources into fixing the design than to try to gamify a bad design. But even if you have a good design, there are still possible ways of making it better through some kind of game layer because of, for example, onboarding. Maybe you will feel really great that you're helping somebody every 30 seconds, but the first 3 months of the job you feel overwhelmed because you don't know how to help anybody because you don't know enough of the underlying content to give answers, and so you're always running around trying to find answers, and you're not getting that motivation that you feel so good about helping people every 30 seconds, and so you quit before you even get there. So what a gamification project might be for that job, even though the job itself is good, is the onboarding process, where how do we get people from first day on the job to I can help people every 30 seconds, from there to there, by creating some kind of onboarding gamified process that gets them there. And then once they're there, they don't need you anymore.
It still sounds
So we had another question here? Yes.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned with the issue that you're talking about in terms of iteration.
Yep.
So you get a project, and you define what are your objectives, what are the behavior changes you're trying to achieve.
Yep.
And you get some level of improvement through the course of the project.
Right.
And then you say, okay, fine, this is working, that's not working, and we'll do a little more again. But is there a certain point where you get as far as you're going to get? And does the gamification project end because you've now achieved a certain amount? Or does the gamification become part of the ongoing business process?
So,
Because if I'm back looking at taking on a gamification project and I'm saying, oh, I have to stack with this, I have to keep this project going, I get nervous.
So it's the latter, right? As I said before, it's a living, breathing program. So while you'll have a skeleton in place, while you'll have the program in place, just like with anything that you do, any project that you ever work on, the inputs change, And when the inputs change, the outputs change, right? What comes in, essentially the gamification or the process of design, right? Which is one of the things I wanted to say earlier too, that gamification is just part of the design toolbox. It's a tool. It's not it's just a means to an end. It's not any one thing.
Is it a project or is it an ongoing living?
I would say that scoping and design is a project. The actual usage and utilization is an ongoing thing. It becomes a baked-in part of whatever it was designed into. So if you just think layers, think it's a layer that went on top of the internal process.
Which means it has to be able to have its own legs to live beyond when you guys leave.
Yes, absolutely. Unless you've met your business objective, then fine, you can end the project. But if you haven't, right, it's often just a framework or a skeleton that you can continue to put new inputs, new goals, new things into, and use the right mechanics and tools to help you get there.
If I may add.
Yeah.
I actually was having this conversation with a client last night, so it's just your timing is impeccable. In fact, I was the one telling him this. I said, if ever you're thinking about engaging a consultant or a consulting firm who tells you that anytime you want to make a change, you need to bring them back in at $300 an hour, run away and don't engage them from the beginning, because they will have you for the rest of your life, and there'll always be some change that needs to be made. And in fact, they might design it intentionally, not that it would be unethical in any way, but so that you do keep needing to make tweaks just so they have an excuse to come back in. So no, it's definitely not that. But I think the right answer, with Ankit did make a good point of summarizing, is that it's possible to create the infrastructure as a project. And if it's done properly and your business doesn't change radically in the meantime, you might be able to have one or two people internally who can do the tweaks by understanding what it is that you just created. And then you don't need to bring anybody back. It doesn't become a new project every 6 months, but just changing some of the parameters, making it a little bit more difficult because people are getting to the next level too easily, or making it a little easier because people are not getting to the next level. Or if you have customers, you've now done such a great job on customer retention that you used to have customers who would stick around for 6 months and then leave. Now you've got customers who are sticking around for 6 years and then leaving. That's a great success, but if you want to increase it even more, there might be some new twists that you want to add to the process. So again, it totally depends on what it is that you're doing, but you shouldn't need to bring whoever it is that started it for you back in every 6 months to completely redo it. That would be a false start.
Okay, thank you. So a couple of final stats here. We ran the poll before tonight's session. All of you who were signed up got the app, which was a gamification application. If you notice that small app. So this is how everyone voted before. Ultimate Hype, 27, Ultimate Tool, 73. This is how they voted tonight. Small n, however, either you can't get your emails or, yeah, okay.
Oh, n equals 6. Okay, as a research methods professor, I have to say I cannot accept those results.
We have a problem of significance. Okay.
And yet, if I was a consultant, I could definitely write a report touting how good a job we did.
Okay, let's see. We need to be out by 8 o'clock or just a few minutes.
All right. May I make one brief announcement?
Yes,
Do you mind?
go ahead, quickly.
Okay, the call for proposals for the Human Factors Society annual meeting, which is in Chicago in late October, was just released yesterday. We have a full day of user experience design, which we are just now starting to recruit a keynote speaker, panel sessions, poster sessions, leadership development workshop, a very nice happy hour, if I do say so myself. So I encourage all of you to go to hfes.org, check it out, and submit something so you can come to Chicago.
One thing Mark didn't say is there's never been a UX group within the Human Factors Ergonomic Society before. So this is a new, it's a whole new group.
It's not even a TG.
Yeah.
It's a brain idea. This is our third year doing it, and we haven't asked permission yet.
Okay, everyone, thank you very much.